going to tell you this afternoon about this very famous fossil fish whose name is a bit of a tongue twister. He's called Pterychthyoides milleri, and he's named after the very eminent Victorian geologist and stonemason and editor Hugh Miller, who lived in Cromarty. Miller was a rebellious schoolboy who eventually settled down into an apprenticeship as a stonemason, but very soon after the apprenticeship started, Miller became ill with lung disease due to the rock dust he was continually breathing. So he got a desk job in the local bank and became a bank clerk. And around this time, he followed up his interest in geology that he'd kindled as a stonemason. And he started to find fossils at Cromarty and nearby a beach called Ethi. And the fish called Pterychthyoides milleri is Greco-Latinism for a winged fish named for Miller's honor. It's unusual because this kind of fish is extinct today. It's got these arms and a box-like body and a scaly tail. And when this fish was first seen by the Victorian scientists, they said it looked like a fish that had swum through a turtle shell. And yeah, Pterychthyoides milleri, Miller's winged fish, was something that he struggled with all of his life to reconcile with the very similar looking fish called Coccosthius cuspidatus. And so it's sadly something that he never resolved throughout before his tragic and untimely death. Miller's reputation lives on today, and we have an organization in Cromarty called the Friends of Hugh Miller, of whom I'm chairman, and we work to support the local Hugh Miller Museum, which is run by the National Trust. And in the coming years, we're supporting the refurbishment of the museum for reopening in the next few years. The specimen comes from the Devonian period, which is 388 million years ago. And it's difficult for people to understand nowadays because the area that we're standing in Elgin, the southern Moray coast, and all the way up to Shetland, was one huge lake called Lake Orcady. These fish lived in both the shallows and the deepest part of the lake. But this particular specimen is in a nodule or a concretion, and it comes from a site called Tynet Burn, which isn't far from Elgin. And these are special modes of preservation because normally when a fish dies and is fossilized, it sinks to the bottom of the lake, gets covered over by sediment, which sediment turns into, in this area, sometimes flagstones, and it's a grey color with the fish preserved as a black mineral. On this occasion, there's special conditions occurred whereby the fish died, sunk to the bottom of the nearshore environment, where due to the presence of plants on land and evaporation rate due to the shallower water, there's a high concentrate of calcium carbonate than normal in the water. And through a process of organic chemistry, which is long and difficult to explain, the animal eventually became encrusted by the calcite, carbonate material which was attracted to it. So the animal became a nucleus to the formation of the nodule. Fossilization is actually a race between decomposition and preservation. So often we find these nodules fully formed, but there's no fish inside. And that suggests that what happened was the fish died, started to decompose, the nodule started to form, but the fish decomposed very soon before the nodule was actually consolidated. So all remnants of the fish had disappeared, but the nodule remained, but it was barren. And that's quite usual to find them like that. Sometimes the nodules are found, and they can be the size of a pea, and in that case, they sometimes contain a single scale of a fish. So that happens when a fish becomes broken up after death by being disturbed by scavengers or having been predated before, and that resulted in its death. So this mode of preservation is very unusual. It doesn't happen in every case, and it only happens in nearshore environments. And there are about 7 locations around Moray where this actually happens. These Tynet-Burn specimens, this Tynet-Burn is the locality this comes from, are very much sought after by collectors and museums around the world because of their beautiful colours. It's very unusual for fossils to be preserved red, purple, and white. Usually they're grey or black. But the reason for this is another very rare type of occurrence during the nodule preservation, in that the red colour we determined comes from the action of bacteria while the animal's decomposing. They're decomposing in an oxygen-free environment. So the only animals that are in the area who can scavenge on the remains are what we call anaerobic bacteria, which means that bacteria that can live without oxygen. But every organism has to have some kind of nutrients to live by. So these bacteria would have metabolized the remains of the fish, and as a byproduct, they deposited iron oxide where they'd fed from, and that gives the fish the red color. The deposits that Pterychthyoides comes from also preserves some extremely important fish. They're called the lobe-finned fish, and these are fish that had fleshy lobes at the base of their fins. And when dissected, some of these fish show the very beginnings of bone structure, which is important to us because they're exhibiting the very start of the evolution of limbs. And they usually evolve these in the shoulder limbs and in the pelvic limbs. So that is equivalent to our feet, our legs and our arms. So these fish are the first on the lineage to four-legged animals, who actually evolved quite soon after in the upper Devonian, and that's represented by specimens that are on display in the museum today.